All right, it's been a long time, but we're back and we're going to start a new series moving my highlights from my Bible and a class that I just did with some people at church into my Logos Bible software. So we're going to be doing the book of Revelation, which is a pretty scary book for a lot of people, and rightly so. I don't minimize that at all. I want to tell you a little bit, real quick, just by way of introduction, what I'm doing with my highlights and what I hope to accomplish and what I don't think that I will accomplish. I have no intent to accomplish this in this series of lessons. My highlights in my Bible are meant to help me navigate the Bible. Whenever I'm preaching or teaching a class or studying with people, it's not all of the notes that I'm going to use whenever I teach, but it's most of the notes. And it's just helping me to see the structure and making it so that I can navigate whenever I teach in an easy way with other people. And so I'm not going to dig into every single little wild thing that comes up in the book of Revelation. There's a lot of them. But that's not the point of what I'm trying to accomplish right now. This would be my ultimate goal and what I would hope would happen from this study. I hope that this study will be stage one for you, that we'll go through the book, that we'll be able to see the big picture and tell the big story and be able to see where we are at any point in the book, and that when we're finished with this, you will probably have a list of questions and you'll be able to go back and know right where you are in the big picture of Revelation and start digging into some of those deeper questions that you have. And so that's really what I hope to accomplish with this. I think that there's one thing that I have to say before I start moving notes and highlighting, which is what this video is all about. One of the very first things that always comes up, normally comes up when you're talking about Revelation is the date. People talk about the date of the book of Revelation, but I think what they're really doing is they're talking about the audience and the purpose of the book of Revelation. And so I think a minority view would be called the early date. The early date of the book of Revelation is that it's early. It is before AD 70 when Jerusalem was destroyed. And what the early date is doing is saying that the book of Revelation is written about, let's just say, Jerusalem. When you say Jerusalem, though, it includes like all of Judaism, all of the system of circumcision and Sabbath observance and dietary restrictions, all of that stuff. Jerusalem. The early date says that the book of Revelation is written about the destruction of Jerusalem. And so if you're going to take the early date of Revelation, the whole 22 chapters of Revelation is basically a long extended version of Jesus's Olivet Discourse, which is Matthew 24, Luke 13, and Luke 21. Those chapters where Jesus is looking out at Jerusalem and he says, every single one of these buildings is going to be destroyed. Revelation is just a long version of that if you're going to take an early date. And so the main bad guy, according to an early date, would be Jerusalem. So as you read through the book of Revelation and you see all of these enemies who are giving God's people a hard time, if you're an early dater, that's Jerusalem. Jerusalem and everything that Jerusalem covers. I respect some of my favorite teachers are early daters, and early on I even thought that Revelation was an early date perspective, and I taught a class before from an early date perspective, and so I understand it a little bit and I appreciate it a little bit, and there's a couple of chapters in Revelation where that's going to be really appealing. So there's the early date. Number two, there is a late date perspective of the book of Revelation. And the late date is just later than AD 70. The late date says that the book is not about Jerusalem and all things Judaism that are going to be destroyed by God. The bad guy is not Jerusalem in the late date. The bad guy is Rome. Rome and some of the stuff that goes along with Rome, not just like the empire, but the cult of emperor worship. And a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about that some of these early Christians were having to live through and deal with, you will either offer a sacrifice and worship the emperor, or you will lose your job and maybe even your life. And some of the localized persecutions that we know about with Nero and Domitian, where Christians like Paul and Peter actually were martyred and killed because of their Christianity. And so a late date is going to say the bad guy in the book of Revelation is Rome and all things attached with Rome, and it's about the ultimate destruction and victory of God over Rome. This is a majority view, and it's probably where I land right now. If I'm going to just say this is what I think the book of Revelation is about, I think it makes a little bit more sense. It doesn't mean it's perfect and that there's not some questions along the way, but I say all of this just because you probably need to know something about when people say, are you an early dater or a late dater, and what is the book of Revelation about, Jerusalem or Rome? You should know that. But for the most part, in these series of lessons, I'm not going to be talking about either of those things. I'm going to be talking about Revelation from a principle perspective, and that is, what is the message that God has given to his people that is true for all people, Christians, all people, not just Christians, for all people in all times and all places and all circumstances. And I don't think that this is a view that is just pie in the sky. I'm not trying to take, this is what somebody would say, they'd try and get me out of trouble. Well, you're just not trying to take a perspective. No, that's not what this is. I think there actually is some reason in the book of Revelation to take this perspective. Number one, the book was recorded and written in a Bible that has been preserved for us. And so the message is not just for that group of people in their circumstances. The message is for me right now. That would be one of the biggest arguments I would think lends itself to a principle perspective on the book of Revelation. A second thing that I want you to think about is in chapters 2 and 3, Jesus wrote 7 letters to 7 churches in Western Turkey, Asia Minor. And there are more churches in that part of the world that we know about in this period of biblical history. And so the question would be something like, why didn't Jesus include other churches? Why did he only include these 7 churches? And the ESV Study Bible says something. I wrote it down here that I want to share with you. The ESV Study Bible says about the 7 churches that Jesus is not just writing to these 7 churches about their 7 individual circumstances and problems. Listen to this. It says, Christ selection of 7. There's a lot of symbolism in the book of Revelation. Christ's selection of 7, symbolizing completeness, implies that he addresses the whole church among them. In other words, these 7 letters to these 7 churches are not supposed to be for each of these 7 churches and that's it. Jesus is painting a picture for us and saying, this is my message to the church, which includes all churches in all places and all times. And the messages are universal. And so I don't think that you have to read this book from an early date or a late date perspective. I think you can read it from a principle perspective. And there's a couple other things that I want you to think about, like, for example, the bad guy or one of the bad guys in the book of Revelation is Babylon, listed as Babylon. And so an early date perspective is going to say Babylon represents Jerusalem, and a late date perspective is going to say Babylon represents Rome. To which I would say, yes, that's right. Why didn't God say Babylon? Why didn't God say Jerusalem or Rome specifically if that's who he was talking to? Why did he talk about Babylon? A big general picture of worldly empires specifically that stand opposed to God's people and captivity of God's people and God's things. Because Babylon can represent Jerusalem or Rome or Greece or the United States or China or Russia. It's universal and big in principle. And so there's a reason why I think we can take a principle approach to Revelation. And then one last thing, since we're talking about empires, when we get to chapter 13, there's going to be a beast. And the beast is described as a dragon. And the dragon has different attributes, like a lion, like a leopard, like a bear. And all of those things come directly from Daniel chapter 7. And in Daniel chapter 7, the lion represented Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, and the bear that was raised up on one side represented Medo-Persia, the Medo-Persian Empire. One section of it was big and one section of it was small. And the leopard with wings represented Greece. Alexander the Great just flew across the world and conquered everything really fast. And then the dragon, or the great beast, represented Rome. And the beast in Revelation 13 is made up of all of these things. And I think the main thought here is that it's not just about Jerusalem, which would be really bad. If you describe Jerusalem as the beast or Babylon, that's really bad. God is really saying something about God's people. But it doesn't only represent Jerusalem, and it doesn't only represent Rome. It represents all empires of man, kingdoms of man, and especially those that stand opposed to or against God and his ways and his people and their ways of life. And so I'm going to take a bigger principle look at the book of Revelation, and not just a small isolated, this is about Jerusalem, this is about Rome. I'm not going to do that. Okay. So I think we're ready to start getting into it. The first thing that we're going to do is talk about the structure of the book. And so let me go over to my Bible and camera view here. You're going to have to be real patient with me. I'm not a production studio. I'm just doing everything right here at my table, and so I'll do the best I can with that. But this is the Revelation text. I think, let me show you this. I've got something for you here. This is new that I haven't had in the past. This is a picture of my Bible and my document cam. And so right up here next to the title is where I put the big structure. If you want to pause the video right now and write that, that would be fine. Although I'm going to do something just a little bit different than what you see right here. I'm going to take the bottom section and do something different with it. So I'm going to go to, I think what I'll do is I'll put the structure. Normally in my Bible software, I will attach notes about the whole book just to the title section. And so I'm going to take a Bible study note, and this is a structure note. Structure is orange for me. And so let me find an orange color. My note is going to be orange. Did you see that, since we're talking about structure, that it's written in orange pen because it has to do with structure? And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write the outline. And let's do this. I like my formatting to be okay. Let's put some bullet points in there. And here is going to be my outline of the book of Revelation. Number one, I'm going to do Revelation. Let's just do numbers 1 through 3. That's going to be the 7 letters. Jesus' 7 letters to the 7 different churches. It actually starts in chapter 1 and verse 4, John to the 7 churches that are in Asia. We'll mark that next time. You don't have to worry about marking it now. The second section is going to be chapters 4 through 11, and I'm going to call that Opening the Scroll. this whole section, it starts in chapter 4 with a throne scene. Here is God on his throne. And then there are people around the throne, and they're saying, God has a scroll. Who is able to open it? And everybody's real upset because nobody's able to open it. But then here comes a lamb in chapter 5, and the lamb is worthy to open the scroll. And, excuse me, the first couple of chapters are him breaking the seals on the scroll. And finally, when we get to chapter 11, the scroll is open, and here is, that's probably chapter 10. The scroll is open in chapter 11. Here's the message of the scroll. So this whole first section is going to be opening up the scroll. Number 3, I'm going to call that chapters 12 through 16, and that's going to be spiritual warfare. I'll just write spiritual war in my outline. And that's going to be a picture of what's happening. Chapter 12, the war that happens in heaven with the dragon or the devil, and how the devil gets kicked out of heaven, and now he's got this chip on his shoulder, and he's mad at God. He's mad at God, so he comes after God's people, and the way that he comes after God's people, in chapter 13, there's a sea beast, and then there's a land beast, and as you move through this whole section, there's just this really nasty picture of why God's people are suffering here in this life, because there are spiritual forces behind the scenes that are causing us to suffer, and what God is doing about that and what we're supposed to do in the midst of that. This is what I'm going to do different. Look at this. This is what's in my Bible. I probably need to white this out. I will. I've got 2 sections here, 17 through 20 and then 21 to 22. I'm going to turn that into one section in this outline. I'm going to call that 17 through 22. And I'm going to call this whole section, earlier I said something like the destruction of God's enemies. That might work. But I think what I'm going to do with this one is call this victory. Because what you have in this section is not a broken up section of the destruction of God's enemies and victory. The whole thing is victory. And I think that you can tell that it's one big section because it's a series of 7 visions. 12 through 16 is a series of 7 visions. 17 through 22 is another series of 7 visions. And so I'm trying to understand the structure that God has given to us in this book. So I'm going to call this whole big section victory. And then if you wanted to write just the theme of the book of Revelation is that Jesus wins. And so I have that also in my Bible. So there's the structure and how I'm going to approach the book of Revelation. I think there's only 2 more things that I want to do in this video by way of introduction. And the first is with this word, revelation. So what I'm going to do with this word, in my Bible, look at this. In my Bible, this is what it looks like. It's blue. I highlighted it blue because I'm going to pay attention to the word. And with my blue pen, I wrote a couple different notes here that have to do with this word, something that I want to pay attention to. So I'm going to move that into my Bible. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new note here. I'm going to turn it into a blue note because it has to do with words. I think I'm going to highlight it blue because I want to see that I'm paying attention. See what that looks like? It's got a blue highlight and it's got a blue note, which says to me, pay attention to this word. So here's the thing that I want to write about this. The word revelation is apocalypse. It's apocalypsis, but I'm English and not Greek, and so I'm not going to say apocalypsis. I'm going to say apocalypse. And so I'm going to write this. I'm going to write apocalypse. And the reason why I'm paying attention to this word is because here's your short definition. If you just want to write something short and quick and easy, what does apocalypse mean? A short definition is an uncovering. But look at this in my Bible. I wrote the short definition, an uncovering. But I love this so much that I wrote it over in the side. And so I'll do this sometimes. I write L-O or /n, which means Louw-Nida. That's my abbreviation for the Louw-Nida lexicon. And here's the definition that Louw and Nida have for apocalypse. They say that it is to, I can't see my writing from over here, to cause something to be fully known. And I hope that you understand why I'm talking about this right now and why I think that this is so amazing for the book of Revelation. Most people are scared to death of the book of Revelation because there's a lot of weird stuff going on here and a lot of visions and things that we read. And I'm not telling you that you're going to understand everything perfectly when we're finished with this overview. There's a lot of hard and weird stuff. But what's crazy to me about that is that the book identifies itself and introduces itself as an uncovering, or it is something that God is telling us, this vision that God is giving us through John and saying, I am showing you this and telling you this because I want everything to be fully known. And I love that. I love that so much because it is, we're going to see this over and over again in this study, is almost the exact opposite from how people treat the book of Revelation. Revelation is a book full of hidden and covered up mysteries. No, God said Revelation is a book where I'm going to show you visions that uncover things for you and help you to understand who I am and what I'm doing and what that looks like in the world today. So that's really exciting to me to talk about that. This is kind of a connected point, not just with the word revelation, but how God is doing this in the book. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my note on the word to show. And I think what I will do with this is make this a yellow note. Sometimes when I make a note, I like to give it a little pencil underline. I've got that somewhere here, a little pencil underline. And so this is just in my Bible software. Let me show you the way that this looks in my actual Bible right now. I have the word to show, and then I've got a note right up here. But since it's all together on the same page, it also comes down here. This is kind of a connected thing, and I can see and know that. And so I lied to you about this. I want my Logos Bible online to look the same as my physical Bible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight that yellow. There we go. Yellow highlight, to show. And this is where I want to talk about something about how the book of Revelation is visual. It's this series of visions. So look at this. If we're going to talk about visions, I want this note to do this. I want it to point me to Revelation chapter 1 and verse 19. And if you go to Revelation 1 and verse 19, this is what God said to John about this message that he's about to reveal. Write therefore the things that you have seen. It's a vision. The things that you have seen, those that are and those that are to take place after this. So write this vision of what exists in the world right now, but also a vision of what's going to happen later in the future. I also want to do this. You don't need to write all of these things, but this is what I have in my written Bible. Just a little reminder here. Numbers chapter 12 in verses 4 through 8. I think this is important for me to see this. The Lord said to Moses and to Aaron and Miriam, "Come out, you three, to the tent of meeting." And the three of them came out, and the Lord came in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tent and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forward. And he said, "Hear my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, will make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. This is not new. This is how God has communicated with his people throughout all history. And he says about Moses and Aaron and Miriam, this is not true with Moses. I don't communicate with Moses like I communicate with all the other prophets. But visions are the way that God communicates. And so Revelation is really no different in that regard. I also have a note. You might want to put something that connects it to chapter 1 and verse 11. Let's slide down there and take a look at that real quick. Chapter 1 and verse 11. Write what you see in a book and send it to the 7 churches. I think I'll do that. I'll come up here to this note. Revelation chapter 1, 11, 19. And so that's just pointing me to this idea that Revelation is this vision. That's not something to know that's just trivia. That's fun or good to know. I think that it's something that's going to be important for the book of Revelation. Let me just show you an example. I'll show you an example of what this looks like. I'm going to go real quick to Revelation chapter 5, and I'll give you an example of why this is important. So in Revelation chapter 5, there's the scroll, and we're all upset because nobody is able to open the scroll. And there's good news. All of a sudden, there is somebody who's able to open the scroll. And look at this. We'll mark this later. Don't worry about marking this right now. And what you see here, chapter 5 and verse 5, one of the elders said to me, "Weep no more. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has conquered so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals." The reason why I'm pointing you to that right now is because in chapter 5 in verse 5, it says, one of the elders said to me. This is what I heard. And in Revelation, what you hear is kind of like, I think of it like this. There's going to be a lot of stuff. What did we hear? What did we read about in the Old Testament? What I heard is like this. It's, what was I expecting to happen? It's my expectations. That's what I heard. And so, oh no, nobody's able to open the scroll. And one of the elders said to me, this is what I heard. This is what I was expecting, especially what I was expecting from the Old Testament. I was expecting the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David. The one who's going to open the scroll, my expectation is that it's going to be a lion and King David and somebody who comes with this force. But then look at what happens in verse 6. Between the throne and the 4 living creatures and among the elders, I saw is different from what I heard. The reality of this vision in Revelation is different from what I was expecting. It's still the same end result, but it doesn't look the same as what I was expecting it to look like. And so what I saw was a lamb standing as though it had been slain. And so think about this in the book of Revelation. What I was expecting was a lion roaring who's going to come, King David, and open the scroll with power. But the reality of this vision is that what I saw was a lamb with a slit throat like he had been killed. And so all of that fits into this concept of what we're looking at here with Revelation, the book of Revelation as a vision. What are we going to see as we move throughout this book? That's probably enough for that right now. There's one other thing that I want to do with this book, and that is the timing of the book, or something that happens for the audience. And this is another thing that's really fun and exciting. Let me show you what this looks like in my Bible. Chapter 1 and verse 3 says, "Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of the prophecy, and blessed are those who hear." By the way, Let me come back so you can see me on this one. By the way, as we move through the text of Revelation, I'm going to be reading it. I don't want to just have you transfer the highlights that I'm highlighting. First of all, because God said, blessed is the one who reads, and I kind of want to be blessed. But also it says, and the one who hears. And the right way to move through the Bible is to read it. So we're going to be reading the text as we move through. Verse 3, blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written in it. And then listen to this, for the time is near. Okay, so let's go back to our Bible and let's write something about that. For the time is near. And I want a note connected to that. And I'm going to leave it like that. It's just yellow. It's just a note. There's nothing, it's not a section. I'm not paying attention to a word necessarily. It's just a note. So yellow will do that for me. For the time is near. And look at how I wrote that here. I've got some other things written there, some other passages from Revelation chapter 22. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make those references here. Revelation 22, and I'm going to do verses 6 and 7, and verse 10, and verse 12, and verse 20. And I think I was going to skip this part, but let's just go ahead and do this together right now. I'm going to go to Revelation 22 and verse 6. And he said to me, these words are trustworthy and true, and the Lord, the God of the spirits of the prophets, has sent his angel to show his servant, listen to this, what must soon take place. That's going to be yellow for me. Verse 7, and behold, I am coming soon. Yellow. And verse 10, and he said to me, do not seal up the words of the prophecy of this book, for the time is near. Yellow. And verse 12, behold, I am coming soon. Yellow. And then verse 20. He who testifies to these things says, surely I am coming soon. Yellow. In my Bible, next to each one of these, I think this is true. Let me come over and show you this. I'm in chapter 22 right now, and you see all of those different highlights. I'm coming soon. But look at this. I said, go to chapter 1 and verses 1 through 3, the things which must soon take place. I'm coming soon. The time is near. I'm coming soon. And then there's one more at the very last section of that. And so there's actually a note written in there, which I'll probably clean up after this video and put that note in my Bible software too. I'm sure that I don't have to tell you why this is pretty stinking awesome to think about this, but almost everybody, when you think about the book of Revelation, almost everybody thinks about Revelation as something that's going to happen in the distant, far-off future that probably really doesn't have anything to do with me right here and now. But that's not true. When Jesus is giving this revelation, this message to these churches, what he says to them is, y'all better pay attention because this stuff is about to happen soon. So one of the neatest things that I think has ever happened to me, if sometimes this happened, I just got goosebumps just thinking about this and talking about this right now. Tyler Sexton was one of the people who went through the class and highlighting Revelation with us, just a group of people. And at one point, he was just really, really excited about this class and getting really into it. And I asked him, what is the thing? Why are you so excited about this? And what's getting you so wound up about this? And the thing that he said is what we're talking about right now. He said, I've always thought about Revelation as some book that has to do with the far off, like the second coming or judgment day or the far off distant future. But as we went through the book of Revelation, he said the thing that got him the most excited is to say, this book is about me right now. The message is for me in 2024 right now, and what I'm seeing in the world around me right now and how I'm supposed to live in light of all of this. And so that's really exciting. That's a fun thing to think about. The message of the book of Revelation is the time is near. It is for you right now. So I think that's it for this video. One of the things that I'm planning in the next video is I'm going to skip most of chapter 1 because I want to do chapter 1 at the very end of all of this series because I think it will mean a whole lot more to you then. So I'm going to skip most of the text of chapter 1 and I'm going to start right here in verse 4, John to the 7 churches that are in Asia. In the next video, I'm going to talk to you about these 7 letters and how they're organized. And then for probably several lessons after that, maybe 7, I want to take a pretty high view about the message of each of these 7 letters. And I'm sure that you've read them, and I'm sure that you've heard sermons about it, but it's really important because what Jesus is saying to these 7 churches is their current circumstances for why the book of Revelation needed to be written in the first place. And so it's like a real life, boots on the ground circumstance for some of the behind the scenes spiritual stuff that we're going to see as we move throughout Revelation. Thank you for joining me in these videos, and I hope that this is beneficial to you. I would just ask one thing. If you're going through these full videos and you're highlighting and you're making your notes, I would really appreciate it if you would hop on the Facebook or the Instagram page, take a picture of your notes and share it with me because this is a selfish reason. I love to see what other people come up with and how you mark your Bible. So I'm looking forward to seeing that too as we go. I'll see you next time.